Good morning. Welcome to our math lesson. Let's go ahead and get started by reading our learning target. I can measure the length of an object in inches and centimeters. Let's go back and talk about that word, measure. Measure means to find the length, the height, or the weight by comparing it to an unknown unit. Okay? We're focusing on measuring length. The length is a measurement that tells the distance from one point to another or how long something is. So if I wanted to know the length of this card, I would measure from one point to the other to see how long it is. That's the length. We use a ruler to measure length. A ruler is a measuring stick that is marked in inches and in centimeters. Now, that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to find the length in inches and centimeters. So let's look at this word inches. Inches is a unit of length. Inches has 12 inches that equals 1 foot. The length of one ruler is 1 foot. So 12 inches equals 1 foot. On a ruler, there are 12 inches. You can also think about a quarter. A quarter is about 1 inch across the middle. We also have this other unit called centimeters. A centimeter is also a unit of length. And if you hold up your pinky finger, across your fingernail is about 1 centimeter. Now, units are the part that is used to measure. So inches and centimeters is a unit. Remember we read how big is a foot? And the unit that they used was the king's foot to measure. But remember when they changed to the apprentice foot, that unit wasn't the same as the king's foot. And so when they measured the bed and the king's foot and then the apprentice's foot, it wasn't the same size, right? So when we're measuring something and everybody wants it to be the same, we have to use the same unit, okay? All right, so what we're going to do today is we are going to look at the units of inches and centimeters, okay? We're going to practice measuring in both of those. So for our lesson today, you are going to need a ruler, or you're going to need the paper ruler that has been attached to Google Classroom. You will need to print that off. If you can't print it off and you don't have a real ruler, then it's going to be hard for you to do this lesson, okay? So I encourage you, if you don't have one of those items ready, go ahead and stop the video, get those items prepared, and then you can start the video back, okay? Now we're going to be in our Ready Math Journal on page number 501. 501, okay? All right, we're going to go ahead and read this problem. Which piece of yarn is 11 centimeters long? Which piece of yarn is 4 inches long? So in this problem, what do you know? You know that there are 2 pieces of yarn, and one piece is 11 centimeters, and one is 4 inches. What do you need to find? You need to find which string is 11 centimeters and which string is 4 inches long. How can you do that? How can you find out how long they are? You can measure, yes. So you're going to take your ruler that you have and you are going to measure each of these. One you're going to find in inches, 4 inches, and one you're going to find in centimeters, 11 centimeters, okay? All right, go ahead and measure both of these strings. Find out which one is 11 centimeters and which one is 4 inches long. When you're done, you may unpause the video. All right, now let's go ahead and let's begin by checking, okay? So I have zoomed mine out to be the size of yours. I know this is hard for you to see, but I'm still on page 501 here. And I'm going to go ahead and start by measuring the blue line. Now, when you're measuring, it's important that you start at the end of the object. It's also important to start at the 0. So I want you to look at my ruler here. My ruler doesn't have a 0. If it doesn't have a 0, then it's assumed that you start at the end. If your ruler has a 0 on it, then you will start at the 0. Even if the 0 is not on the end, you have to start on the 0, okay? So I'm going to line up the end of my ruler with the end of that blue line, okay? I've measured the blue line in inches, and I see that it is 4 inches. Now I'm going to measure the yellow line in inches. The yellow line is about 5 inches, okay? Now I'm going to measure both of them in centimeters. I'm going to do the same thing. Look at your centimeter side. If there's not a 0, it's assumed that you start at the end. If your ruler does have a 0, then you'll have to start at the 0, okay? So I'm going to line my ruler up with the end of my object, and I can see that the blue line is about it's a little shorter. So the blue yarn is a little bit smaller than 11 centimeters. Now let's check the yellow line. Remember, we have to start on the end. The yellow line is about 11 centimeters. So if I go back, we can answer the question, which yarn is 11 centimeters? Okay. Which yarn is 4 inches? Yes, the blue line is 4 inches and the yellow yarn is 11 centimeters. So which one is bigger here? 4 inches or 11 centimeters? 11 centimeters is longer than 4 inches, okay? Why is 11 centimeters longer than 4 inches? Inches are a bigger unit of measure, so it takes less inches to equal more centimeters, okay? All right, now let's go ahead and let's turn over to page 106 and let's look at what they have to help us answer this question. So we can use an inch ruler, and they've talked about it here. See, this ruler has a 0. So when it has a 0, you have to line your object up on that 0. So that is where it starts, on the 0. Then you can look, and it stops at 4 inches here because that's what we needed. And you can easily tell which yarn goes past 4 inches and which one actually stops on 4 inches, okay? So then we're going to look at the number, and we see that the blue yarn is 4 inches. Now when we look at the yarn again, but this time with centimeters, we can see that the blue yarn is less than 11 centimeters, and the yellow yarn lines right up with 11. Now let's look at page 503. Question number 1 says, how do you know what units are on, or what units a ruler shows? But basically, what units are included on a ruler, okay? How do you know which units are included on a ruler? Go ahead and pause the video and answer that question. All right, let's go ahead and answer it now. So on a ruler, sometimes it will tell you, like in our examples on page 305, it'll tell you the units, okay? So some rulers tell the units, inches and centimeters. But if the ruler doesn't tell you inches and centimeters, how would you know that inches and centimeters are on the ruler? What are some clues that we've learned about inches and centimeters? We kind of talked about this just a minute ago. Okay, so we know that it takes more centimeters to equal inches, right? So when we think about centimeters, we think about things small, like across our pinky. That is about 1 centimeter. So a small unit on a ruler can be centimeters. And the larger unit on a ruler is an inch. Okay? So the ruler has inches and centimeters included. All right, so which color yarn is 4 inches long? We're answering that question. It was the blue yarn. All right, so which yarn was 11 centimeters? The yellow yarn. All right, go ahead and explain how you use a ruler to measure the length of the yarn in inches or centimeters. So go ahead now and take your time to explain how you use a ruler. When you're done, you may unpause the video. All right, so the way that we use a ruler is we take and we either use the inches side, which is the larger unit side, or the centimeter side. We look at the object. We start on the end of the ruler or the zero if there is one indicated on the ruler. We match up that zero or the end with the end of our object. Then we go across to find where our object stops, and then we look at the number that is below that object to tell us the length of the object, okay? All right, go ahead now, and I want you to think. It says, which model or strategies do you like best for measuring in inches or centimeters? Really, you can use things that you can find, but remember, we talked about that not being as reliable as the units, inches or centimeters, because remember, inches and centimeters is the same for everybody. If I measure in inches or centimeters and I measure correctly, I should get the same thing that you get, right? So we're looking at that unit that is universal. It's the same for everybody, okay? So I think that's important for you to know how to use a ruler based on different things that you could use that maybe you find that are not universal units, okay? All right, let's go ahead now and let's look at the next page. We're going to practice measuring together, okay? All right, it says in number 6, we're on page 304. Ty made the top ruler. Lynn made the bottom ruler. Circle the ruler that is made correctly. Explain how you know. So I want you to think back to when we read how big is a foot. Remember, the king's foot and the apprentice foot was not the same size. So they had to use that common unit of measure to make sure they measured it correctly. So I want you to look at the first ruler. What do you notice about the first ruler? In between those numbers, what do you notice? Well, the distance between 0 and 1 is not the same distance between 1 and 2. And the distance between 2 and 3 is not the same distance as between 3 and 4. Okay? So is it really an inch between 1 and 2? Could you fit a quarter in between 1 and 2? No. All right, now let's look at the second ruler that Lynn made. We have 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. Those look evenly spaced out. So the ruler that is evenly spaced out is made correctly, okay? Because we have to have that same length between each space for it to accurately be an inch. All right, number 7, use a ruler. How long is the paintbrush in inches? So we're going to measure it. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your ruler out. All right. You're going to find either the end of your ruler or the 0 on your ruler. You're going to put the end of your ruler or the 0 of your ruler right underneath the bristles of that paintbrush. Okay? All right, once you have it under the bristles of your paintbrush, we're going to continue. Okay, so the end or the 0 on your ruler is right underneath the bristles. Now you're going to come all the way across to the end of the paintbrush where the handle stops, and you're going to look at that number that is right below the end. What is the number that is right below the end of that handle? Right at the end. It's the number 5. So this is telling us that the paintbrush is 5 inches. You have to include that unit. The paintbrush is 5 inches long. So if I were to take the paintbrush away and just hold up my ruler, this would be how long the paintbrush is. So now we're going to answer that question. The paintbrush is 5 inches. So where it says solution, you're going to write 5. You can spell out the word inches, or the abbreviation for inches is 5IN, okay? IN also means inches. It just helps instead of you spelling out the whole word. All right, number 8. Tony says the crayon is 8 centimeters long. Explain what Tony did wrong. Then find the correct length of the crayon. All right, so think about what Tony did wrong. When you're done, you may unpause the video. Where did Tony start the beginning of his object? He started it at the number 1. Where are you supposed to start the beginning of your object? You're supposed to start it on the 0 or at the end of the ruler if the 0 isn't on there. So he is already counting an inch in his measurement. Remember, when you take it, you have to take your take your ruler and start it underneath your object at the 0 or at the end. Then you go to the end of the object and look down at where it is, okay? So go ahead and take your ruler. Start at the 0 if there is one. If there is not a 0, start at the end. Put it underneath the tip of the crayon. Then look at where the end of the crayon is at the number underneath. The number underneath should be 7. So this crayon is 7 inches long. Remember, we have to include that unit of measure. Centimeters. 7 centimeters long. See, it's important to think about those units, right? So when we don't start at the end or on the 0, we do get an inaccurate measure, okay? All right, guys, have fun practicing. Bye.